I recently came across an article that highlighted the epidemic of loneliness, a phenomenon amongst a whole generation of people that were either born into the internet or were raised in it. And these people, including myself, are more connected through social media platforms than ever before. Many of them are experiencing feelings of loneliness and isolation. There could be several reasons as to why this is happening. Maybe people don't feel the need to socialize because they have video games, social media, Netflix, or other distractions. I can relate to this on a personal level. For a significant portion of my life, especially after college, I struggled with loneliness and an inability to connect with other people. But over time, I think I've learned a few things that would have helped me a lot if I had known them from the start. This is my story and experience with the epidemic of loneliness and what I've learned from it. Part 1. Moving to San Diego. My story starts like many others. After graduating college. My college experience, it was pretty typical. I made some good friends, some good acquaintances, and overall, I had a good time. But after graduation, like a lot of other people, I had to start my career in a different city from my normal social circle. In 2017, I landed a job in Carlsbad, a city in the northernmost part of San Diego County, and about an hour's drive away from Irvine and Orange County, which was my previous home. Moving to a new city, it could have been the perfect opportunity for me to make new friends, make new connections, and just start fresh. But at the same time, it was just too easy for me to just fall back on my comfort zone, given how close I was to my old home and my old friends. I would make the drive constantly back and forth between Irvine, just because it was easier and more comfortable than making new friends. I moved to a small apartment near a local university in La Jolla, San Diego, thinking that just being near a college campus would help me find friends. But of course, this was absolutely crazy. And it became brutally apparent that living close to a college campus was not going to net me friends. But I was in denial that that stage of my life, it was over. And when I finally accepted that, I spent most of my time in my room, too shy to talk to anyone and too anxious to step outside of my comfort zone. And instead, I turned to my job at the time to find the social connections that I crave. I had heard mixed opinions from others about making friends at work. Some people were successful, but others strongly warned against it. For me, my experience was somewhere in between. At the time, I worked as a junior software engineer at a small startup. There were only 5 people at the company, including one other junior engineer who was also out of college and one other part-time engineer who was still going to college. I spent most of my time at my desk and not really talking or interacting with anyone. But luckily for me at the time, my coworkers were much more sociable than I was. And over time, they invited me out to lunch, they made small talk with me, and I began to slowly become more and more comfortable around them. We began to bond, and we started spending more and more time outside of work, playing pool or video games, sometimes going out to breweries or restaurants. And for a time, I felt really happy with everything. I felt like I had finally gained the social interaction that I craved in San Diego. And as a result, I was starting to feel less and less lonely every single day. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this whole relationship, it was very, very fragile. This connection, it hinged upon us seeing each other for 8 hours a day, for 5 days a week. If one of us left the company, would we still be friends? I was worried that I would fall right back into loneliness if I couldn't figure out how to maintain this level of friendship afterwards. And while I enjoyed becoming closer to my coworkers, there always seemed to be a mental barrier, preventing us from forming deeper relationships. Careers and friendships, they don't always mesh well. And despite spending hours together every single day, I never felt as connected to them as I did with my friends from college. And eventually, the day did come where my coworkers and I parted ways in order to pursue new job opportunities. At this point, we were spread on all different parts of the country. And due to the distance, there was no longer a physical component to our friendships. We just didn't see each other for 40 hours a week anymore. And our attempts to keep in touch online was met with the realization that we just didn't have that much in common. And for me, at this point, nothing had really changed. I ended up with the same amount of friends in San Diego as when I started. Zero. I had relied on others to initiate social plans and to make connections, and I still struggled to make friends on my own. Throughout this whole experience from transitioning from college to the workforce, I learned a few valuable lessons. The first thing I learned was to completely let go of college after it has ended. In college, there are thousands of people around your age, all with a shared goal of building their future. I realized that this unique environment, it is never going to exist anywhere else in the same way. And I needed to adjust my expectations and focus on building friends in new ways. The second lesson that I learned was while making friends at work can be great for building connections and short-term friendships, it is not a sustainable solution in the long run. Being friendly with your coworkers, it is absolutely important. But just know that these relationships might not last outside the workplace. As a software engineer, I know that people in our industry switch jobs every 1 to 2 years. And because of that, relying on work as a sole contributor to my social connections was misguided. It was not a long-term solution to loneliness. Part 2. Romantic relationships. The next venture into social connections came from a slightly unexpected place: my romantic relationships. During my time in San Diego, I met a girl, and the relationship itself, it really helped to ease the deep sense of loneliness that I had been feeling. It gave me someone to connect with, to talk to, someone to explore the city with. My girlfriend at the time, she was a former student at the local college nearby, and she had a thriving social life. And as me and her grew closer, she began to introduce me to her friends. And after about a year of dating, I moved into the house where she lived at, with about 6 other people that were there. And being in that house, it gave me a sense of the social connection that I craved. Again, living there meant a consistent group of people for me to spend time with. And generally, along with that, I would spend time with even more mutual friends outside of the house, giving me more of a sense of connection to people. And throughout this whole time, I again felt a sense of happiness that my social life was improving in San Diego. I still remember one Friday night when we were all gathered at the house, playing board games and just generally having a good time. In the moment, I felt like that I had finally made it, that I had established my roots in San Diego. And for the first time since college, I felt a deep sense of community and belonging. But despite the benefits of being in a social circle because of a significant other, there were always lingering doubts in the back of my head. Because I was introduced to this group through my girlfriend, while initially I felt close to them, it became apparent over time that our relationships, they existed because of circumstance and not because of shared hobbies or interests. And although I should have been happy and content with that, I struggled to figure out how to develop deeper connections with the people around me. And I began to doubt whether or not I truly belonged in this circle in the first place. In the end, my relationship didn't work out. And with it, the social circle that I thought I was developing at the time evaporated with it. And through these experiences, I learned an important lesson. Attempting to integrate someone else's life into your own as a path to finding happiness is just a path that is doomed to fail. I relied on my girlfriend for social connection. I relied on her for happiness. Everything had hinged on her. And at the end of the day, that wasn't fair to her or to me. Before getting into a relationship, I should have been focusing on self-improvement and figuring out how to make friends for myself. And without knowing how to do that, without being a complete person first, this relationship was never going to last. Years after moving to San Diego, I was yet again stuck in the rut of loneliness. Part 3. Peak loneliness and an awakening. 2020 and 2021 was peak COVID lockdown, and I was experiencing a deeper sense of loneliness that I hadn't felt before. It seemed like everyone was feeling the isolation at this point. Gyms were closed, and we were encouraged to stay inside and to not see friends. I struggled to adjust. I spent more and more time alone. And in this year, a year where I had craved social connection more than at any point in my life, I realized I had no one to reach out to. I had no passion, I had no social circle, and I felt generally lost in life. I remember spending weeks with nothing going on. On Friday nights, Saturdays, Sundays, I would just spend my time lying in bed, watching YouTube, or playing video games. And it was during this time that I started to develop deep parasocial connections with my favorite YouTubers at the time, because I craved the social connection so badly. In a way, they were my only friends at the time, as sad as that sounds. I couldn't figure out a way out of my rut. In all this free time I had, it became apparently obvious that I had some deep personal issues to address. First, I realized that I needed to find something that I was passionate about in life. For a long time, I tried to fill my life with social connections. But when I was alone, I realized that I had nothing fulfilling to focus on. At one point in my life, I did have a passion for software engineering and computer science. I had a goal to work towards, which was finding a job at a big tech company. I spent a year of studying LeetCode by myself every day after work in hopes of searching for a better future, constantly keeping my brain distracted, busy, and focused. But when I reached the endpoint of that goal, I struggled to fill the void that was created by it. And it was during this time, when I was at peak loneliness, when I finally turned to video creation. It started as only just capturing moments from my life and cutting them into videos. It was just a way for me to capture my memories and my experiences. That was the only goal I had at the beginning. I remember going around San Diego, just walking around the beaches and random locations, just to get footage for editing. And at first, it was a strange feeling, but it taught me how to be truly comfortable with being alone and to learn something, not because it had a greater purpose in my life, but just because I enjoyed it. Eventually, my passion for video and editing evolved into YouTube creation and telling stories. It gave me more things to try out and learn, like script writing, filming, lighting, editing, stuff like that. This part of my journey was a period of growth and discovery. And in this period of my life, I came to the realization that San Diego was not right for me. 5 years ago, I had moved here hoping that I would be able to figure out how to make new friends and make new experiences. But 5 years later, I realized I was just as isolated as when I came here. In the beginning of 2022, I made the decision to move back to Orange County. I felt that a change of scenery would allow me to address the issues in my life and to once again start fresh. And the first thing I did after moving back was begin reconnecting with old friends that I hadn't seen in a while and strengthening my relationships with people that were already in the area. The second thing I did was become comfortable in planning things on my own and doing them on my own. In the past, I had only done things if I was invited by friends or partners. It was during this time where I started planning things just because I wanted to do them. And if I was unable to get other people to join, I would simply do them alone. This included a number of things, like concerts, conventions, or even just being okay with going out to a restaurant and eating by myself. It was a freeing experience to do things just because I wanted to do them. And in the process of doing so, I realized that if I took initiative in my life, I could convince other people to join in on my plans. And as a result of these changes, I gradually became happier with my life. These days, I see friends pretty much every single weekend. And when I'm not seeing them, I make an effort to stay connected in other ways, whether it's through social media or messaging. And when I'm not with friends, I focus on my own hobbies and passions. I read, I write, and I focus on the things that I want to do with my life. 5 things I learned in this journey. Work is a place that you might connect with people, but you probably won't find deep, long-lasting friendships. To be truly happy in life, it's important to find something that you're passionate about and to have a goal to work towards. Making deep connections with others requires vulnerability and time, and probably a little bit of awkwardness and discomfort while breaking out of your shell. To overcome loneliness, it's important to help and develop yourself first. Be okay with doing and planning things alone, just for yourself.